Alright, so we're going to move into sculpting the anatomy of this creature. I've brought the design into ZBrush using Spotlight. On my reference monitors, I have other things that I'll be looking at. Of course, I have my collage, and I'm going to focus on this section of reference. I really like the emaciated human, and some of the details here in the old man. I've got my basic anatomy chart. I'm going to keep that handy. And I've also got an animal anatomy chart. As you can see within the shoulders, there's definitely elements of the quadruped in here. You've got the shoulder connecting to the scapula and then to the elbow. So I'm going to be stealing quite a bit of this and bringing that into the design. So that's going to be to my right, and we're just going to start sculpting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the geometry in my model. Right now we're at 3,267, and I'm just going to hit divide, and you'll notice that that does slim him down a bit. You'll notice that the model loses a bit of its edge, but I can always get that back. And I'm able to toggle between higher and lower geometry just by hitting Shift D to get to lower geometry and then D to jump up to higher geometry. Let's see what else we can do. Let's divide it again. I still want to see some of those edges, and so here's a trick that I like to use. So we have our lowest subdivision active. You'll notice I duplicate my models. I'm going to leave these two visible. Now what you're going to be able to do with models is you're going to be able to project the details of one onto the other. So this is under this. We're currently on the model that has a higher subdivision, and I'm just going to hit project all. I'm able to get the detail or the edges from this version of the model onto this version, but you'll notice that it is a denser mesh, and I just want those edges so that I have that form to work with. And we're going to be doing a bit of projecting again down the line. I just want to start sculpting in some details of the character. Maybe we'll go a little higher. Let's divide this. There we go. Alright, so even at this stage I still want to work with as little geometry as possible, but I want to start capturing the features in this model. I'm going to start building up the cheekbones and the skull. And we have a few subdivisions that we're playing with here. And so I can always jump to my lowest subdivision and move things around. Let's go one higher. Let's just play around with move and get these features to resemble the design a little bit more. Let's cave in that face. Let's build out the cheekbones. I now have more geometry to work with, so I can get more out of this. Let's get those shoulders to read a little bit more. Move in the mandibles. It's great having the reference in the program. It's a lot easier. I don't have to turn my head to look at my reference monitors. I'm still keeping it as simple as possible. Make this a little darker material. Sometimes the reflection off of the material can be a bit distracting. Let's go to a higher subdivision. Alright, not bad. Smooth things out a bit. And I'm going to be faster. Now I'm working with standard, and I just want these shapes to read before I move into Dynamesh. I want to use the limitations of this mesh to my advantage before I free everything up with Dynamesh. Let's keep this further away, and I'm going to start to enhance the anatomy. This is all just the standard brush. Tricep. I'm going to switch to clay. Alright, so we're going to start moving a little bit faster now. I'm going to push up the speed of the recording. And right now my goal is just to get this model ready for Dynamesh. So I'm going to be jumping from low to high geometry over and over again. At this stage now I'm at a little higher level of geometry, and I'm just using the standard brush to block out some of the basic anatomical shapes, the mass of the cranium, the peak of the cranium. I'm really taking advantage of all of this low geometry. Being able to move large masses very quickly is invaluable at this stage. Using Move is still an incredible brush to use at this stage. You can see that I'm really just pushing the model as far as it can go, knowing that I'll be able to go into Dynamesh. I can be pretty aggressive, a little destructive with this mesh, because I know that once I hit Dynamesh, it's just going to blanket the model in even geometry. So I just want to make sure all of my forms are there to begin with. Clay brush is great for blocking out anatomy. I'm just going to go through it very quickly. Indicating the ribs, the obliques, finding the glutes. Now, even though this is a bizarre body type, it's still going to have anatomical patterns that will be recognizable. The eyelids, bringing that in, the zygomatic arch, inflating the head. You'll notice it takes me a while to jump a subdivision. I really want to take advantage of the model at this state. Look how far I can go with just 200,000 polygons. Now, even though I'm refining the model, you'll notice it's not hard for me to maintain my edges while I'm working. This will help me to organize my form. Reworking the scapula, integrating the sternum, the brachialis muscles in the forearm. Now, even though it's an alien body, these are all key points in anatomy that we need to see in order to understand how this creature moves. Even designing wrinkle patterns all indicate the creature's movement and anatomy. Don't be afraid to work with these low-res levels. It is the first mistake artists make when working with ZBrush, and that's jumping into high resolution too early. Without taking the time to work at this level, you risk having a model that ends up feeling a bit gooey and shapeless and formless. You'll notice that even though there isn't a lot of resolution here, the model is very tight. You can really see how the anatomy is integrated into these forms. Being able to jump between high and low subdivisions enable me to affect the way I move the model. I can change it very quickly in general proportions just by going to a low subdivision. Now here I'm going to unify my polygroups, and then I'm going to start to isolate them so that I can quickly hide areas of the model in order to make sculpting a lot more accessible. Like if I wanted to sculpt the inside of the rib cage, I'd be able to do that very easily now just by hiding parts of the model. Here I'm building up the lats. I'm just finding that anatomy. Trying to figure out how this bizarre thigh works. Even though it's a complex leg, there are ways of finding the anatomy and making it make sense. So at this stage, I'm isolating certain areas of the model by polygrouping it, and this will enable me to focus on areas. I love working this way because it's really nice to just see the area that you're working on and not be distracted by the rest of it. Still, just using the move brush, I'm able to get quite a bit of definition out of the model. I'm able to indicate the knuckles, the individual joints in the toes. So one brush can do quite a bit. Inflating the joints in the heel. And I am working with backface mask on. That really helps me to just push the planes that I want and not anything on the adjacent side. That happens a lot when working with fingers. If your backface mask isn't on, you tend to pull too much of the model. I'm not really worried about areas in the feet that are pinching and collapsing in on themselves. I know once I Z-remesh this or Dynamesh it, the problem will solve itself. Again, more sectioning off using Control W to create a polygroup. Now you can either mask off an area and hit Control W, or you can hide sections of the model and hit Control W to create a new polygroup for the visible section of the model. We're really starting to get close to the sketch. He's really starting to feel like the concept. Again, using backface mask to adjust the thickness of the arms and legs. By hitting Command and Shift, I can tap the surface of the model and quickly hide portions of it. Here I'm just enhancing areas of the anatomy. Using Dam Standard, I can carve in aggressively. So it is a fairly fast process, even though we are looking at footage that is sped up. This took me about an hour just to get the model here from a low subdivision. And having those low subdivisions is really valuable. Noticing that the shoulders should be coming more forward, like in the concept. This is something you don't want to do when you're in Dynamesh. It's not going to be as easy to pull those shoulders forward. Now we're ready for Dynamesh.